One day, out of frustration with working for this company in California, I just sat down and I had to write. About 1989 is when I think I wrote that book, and it has sold around the world around a 500,000 copies. It has been published once. Got an invitation to go speak about data warehouse in Antarctica, and well, I'm probably going to say something to you that surprises you, or maybe it doesn't, but but I'm not a big fan of AI. I'm not a big fan of AI. Why? Because
Welcome to SiliconTale, a podcast where we discuss about tech, business, entrepreneurship, and innovation. I'm Akash, and today we have a person who has been called to be one of the most influential people existing in the profession of computer science. I'm talking about a man, legend himself, father of data warehousing, current CEO of Forest Rim Technology, Bill Inman. Bill, welcome to
th-
the show.
thank you, Akash. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. So before we start to discuss more about data warehousing, AI, and data science in general, let's get to know you. So, who is Bill Inman and how your journey started and how it made you the person you are today?
Well, I'm Bill Inman. I live in Denver, Colorado. That's my home. I started off a strange career. I started off when I got out of college trying to be a professional golfer. I was a good golfer, but I was not a great golfer. And I tried for about a year and I got tired of starving to death. And so I looked in the paper and there was an ad for programming, and I had learned to do programming when I was in college, so I went and got that job. That's how I started. I started in a place called Shreveport, Louisiana.
All right. And over the year, like how your journey actually started towards the field of data.
Well, I started off as a programmer, and I wrote many programs, and then I got interested in database administration and database design, and then I worked as a database designer for a number of years, and then I just kept becoming interested in the profession, and finally, after a number of years, I had seen enough systems where you could call me a data architect. And so, if you ask me today what I am today, I would call myself a data architect.
Right? That's absolutely you being humble. And as people know from you, how did you came to be known as the father of data warehousing?
Well, that's kind of a long story. I was working in California for a large California corporation, and I was very frustrated with the way that they were doing business. And so I started to write. And what I was writing really was to myself. I was trying to explain to myself what they should have been doing rather than what they were doing. And that's where I got involved in data, and I realized then that understanding your data is the key to not understanding and managing your data. You can't just understand it; you've also got to be proactive in working with it. Was what the key to success was. And then one day, I asked myself an interesting question. I said, "Why are these corporations struggling with data?" The reason why they were struggling was this: is that when the applications were being built, the applications were built for the immediate requirements of the user. The problem is that a lot of other people in the corporation needed to see that same data. You had people from accounting, people from marketing, people from sales, people from finance, and other people that needed to see the same data that was in the application. The problem is that of the many applications the corporation had, they were never built to accommodate people looking across all of the applications. And that's where the idea of a data warehouse came from.
All right. So once, like, if you look back at your journey, what were the most, like, let's just say, career-defining moments, as well as like early in your career? What were the challenges which you faced once you were entering this profession?
Um, this is difficult for me to say, but one of the best decisions I ever made in my life was to leave my first job. I had a boss that was not a very good boss, and it was my first job out of school, so I didn't know any better. And so my first good decision was to find another boss. And it turned out that the second boss that I found was one of the best bosses I ever had. But that was a very personal thing. But that was the first good decision I made. The second decision that I made, and and I'll be honest with you, I don't know where this came from, but I decided to become a writer, and I had never written anything before in my life. Even when I was going to college, I avoided courses where you had to write. But one day, out of frustration with working for this company in California, I just sat down and I had to write, and there was no one else to talk with. I just started writing. Well, it turns out that I found out that I like to write. And now I have to tell you, the first book that I wrote was not a very good book. I still was learning how to write. Today, after the number of books that I've written, I would consider myself to be at least an adequate writer because I know how to put a book together today. When I first started, I had no idea how you put a book together. But becoming a writer opened my life up to, I'll tell you what it opened it up to. It opened it up to conversations with people that I would never have had the opportunity to have conversations with before. And those I learned so much from talking to people and listening to them and hearing what their problems were that it was a wonderful thing for me to do. So leaving my first boss, number one, and number two, becoming a writer were, were the most influential things in my life.
That's great. And it was kind, I believe it was kind of a destiny as well as a chain reaction, like almost uh, a butterfly effect, where a fluttering of a wing lead to something so great and so miraculous. Alright, so let's talk about data warehousing. So for our listeners who may not be that well known about that, they may not be aware of data warehousing. Can you define like what data warehousing is and why is it so important?
It's kind of interesting. I made the definition of a data warehouse almost 35 years ago, and it's still valid today, which amazes me. But a data warehouse is uh, 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 a I use the word SNIT. That's not. It's a subject-oriented, non-volatile, integrated, time-variant collection of data in support of management decisions. And that's the original definition of data warehouse, and it stands today. The reason we have a need for a data warehouse is because people were building all of these applications, and the applications served the needs of the community that it was built for, but it didn't serve the needs of the organization. If you wanted to look across the organization, you could not do so. To give you an example, um, a manager will ask a person from accounting, what were our quarterly revenues? And they get one answer. The manager will ask the person from sales, what were our revenue? They'll get another answer. They ask marketing, they get another answer. And trying to manage a corporation when you're getting many different answers for what should be a very straightforward question is not any way to run a company. You you're guessing rather than knowing, and so corporations have a need for understanding information across the corporation, and the applications of the day didn't have that. So that's why we needed a data warehouse. We needed to be able to take that data from the many different applications and convert it into a um, into a corporate understanding of data.
All right. And so, just a very weird question to ask, but definitely wanted to know this from you is how do you see the world of data warehouse evolving from by the time you have introduced it? So, from then to now, like what are the major changes which you see, and how do you see these things unfolding over the time?
Well, let me tell you, some things haven't changed. The need for corporate data is still there in the corporation, and that hasn't changed. What has changed is the type of data that we're dealing with. In the very beginning of Data Warehouse, we were dealing only with structured data. And structured data is very important, very powerful data. But today, we have all kinds of other data. We have textual data, we have analog data, we have data from the internet, we have many, many different sources of data from spreadsheets. We have many different sources of data today, and and the data of today has got to be treated differently than the data of yesterday. So, one evolution that's occurring now is the whole notion that data warehouse started with structured data, but today we have lots of other kinds of data. Now, there's a lot that's implied by this because you don't treat, for example, textual data the same way you treat structured data, and you don't treat analog data in nearly the same way that you treat structured data. There's a whole different set of rules and practices that are valid in one environment that are nowhere to be found in the other environments. So that's the evolution that we're going into today. Data warehouse started off as a data warehouse. Today, from an architectural standpoint, we can call a data warehouse a data lakehouse.
True that. Okay, so let's talk about the books you have written and your publications. So, I believe you have written almost more than 60 plus books. And like, can you tell me few of your key publications like which you believe actually made a lot of impact in the world of data?
Well, there's one book that I believe is the most published book in the history of our industry. It's called Building the Data Warehouse, and I wrote it, oh gosh, about 1989 is when I think I wrote that book. It is sold around the world, around a half a million copies. It has been published in 9 different languages, and what's interesting to me was when I wrote that book, I had no idea that it was going to do what it did, and I'm certainly happy for what it did. One thing that I was surprised about was that data warehousing is a concept that is as applicable in the United States as is applicable in China, as it's applicable in India, as it's applicable in Africa, South America, everywhere. I even once got an invitation to go speak about data warehouse in Antarctica. And I have to tell you, I have no desire to go to Antarctica. I told them I was busy, but data warehousing has is a worldwide phenomenon. It's something that pretty much everybody has, and everybody has.
That's great. Now, a question a question, to be honest, I should be asking to all the authors, like whomsoever I have ever got a chance to read book by. So, what actually inspired you to write a book, and how you decided that? So, I believe like writing a book is never a simple task. There are like n number of variables that you need to take into consideration, citations, then what you are putting out, whether it is valid or not, the validation checks. And like a lot happens while writing a book. So, what inspired you to write the book, and how was your experience writing the very first book which you wrote?
Uh, I was inspired to write a book by frustration. I was so frustrated with my job and the people that were managing the company that I had to do something. I had to go to a psychiatrist. I had to write. I had to do something because I was. It frustrated me so much that these people were making these stupid decisions, and if you tried to explain common sense to them, they didn't want to hear. So when I wrote my first book, I'll be honest with you, I wrote my first book for me. I wanted to explain to myself what was going on. And when I finished it, I thought, well, the worst thing that somebody can tell me. Oh, by the way, I had no idea how to write a book. When I wrote my first book, I had no idea what I was doing. It was just me sitting down with a piece of paper and writing. And so when I finished the book, I nearly burned it. I was sitting there with a fireplace, and I thought, well, I'm just going to burn this. And I thought, no, the worst anybody can tell me is this is a terrible, terrible book. Well, I, as a first-time author, I had something that I've never heard of before. I actually had five major publishing houses wanting to publish the book, and it was shocking. I thought, oh my gosh! And now since then, I've learned what it means to write a book in terms of the research, in terms of the background, the diagramming, the all of the things to write a book. But when I first started, I'll be honest, I had no idea what I was doing.
True that. So, out of whatever the books you have written, except for the first book, which book is your favorite?
Well, a book is like a child, and if you have five children, you have, as a father, you have a hard time saying which is your favorite. Um, the book that's had the biggest impact anywhere has been Building the Data Warehouse. It sold 500,000 copies. I believe that that is the most number of books that anybody in our industry has ever sold, and it certainly is a favorite. But it's hard to say they're all. I love every one of them, and again, how does a father choose between his children which one he loves the most? And is you don't, you really don't.
True that. And I believe choosing, and especially for something which you have created, and uh, choosing like which one is your favorite is a very, very weird situation to put you in. But then again, I definitely wanted to ask.
Yes.
So, about the technical writings, so do you believe that over the time, writing a technical book has become easy, or has it become tough, like more tough?
Well, it's like anything else in life. The more you do of it, the better you get, and the more comfortable you get. And when people ask me about writing a book, oh, by the way, I've made it a point throughout my life to try to help as many people that come to me and ask for help writing a book. Quite frankly, most of the people don't really end up writing a book. A few of them do, but I've always tried to be a help to people when they come to me to try to write a book. But I have one piece of advice to give to people that write a book, and that is whatever you do, make it interesting. If it isn't interesting to you as an author, it's not going to be interesting to anybody else in the world. So, uh, uh, and how do you make a technical book interesting? You talk about problems. You talk about solving problems. You talk about what the challenges are, and you talk about what's going to happen once you solve the problem. Those are all interesting things. So making a book interesting, you've got to do. If you don't do that, you're not going to please anybody. Certainly not yourself, but anybody else either. So however you do it, make it interesting. The second thing that a piece of advice that I give people is outline everything before you start. You don't want to get into the middle of a book and then discover, oh my gosh, I should have said something a little bit earlier. I should have said something differently, whatever. So the best way to mitigate that is to outline everything that you're going to be saying. A third piece of advice, and this is a matter of my own personal style, is that I try to include as many diagrams as I can. Diagrams have a way of speaking to people in no other, they have their own, it's one of the most important and most effective ways of communicating. So I try to use as many diagrams as I can. I have to tell you that I once went to Japan and gave a presentation, and I have these diagrams that go along with my presentation. And this one gentleman came up to me at the end and said, "Bill, even though you don't speak Japanese, I understood your presentation just by looking at your diagrams." And so I try to make my diagrams really meaningful and as numerous as they can. And I have to tell you, it's not a natural thing for most people to sit around and write diagrams, but for me it is. But I've been doing it all my professional life. So those are the pieces of advice I would give to any first-time author.
That's great, and I honestly believe, like, especially for the non-fiction book and technical books, until unless they are interesting and they are being made in a way to hook you, people will get disengaged very frequently. And I guess that is a common notion. And diagrams definitely help. As a kind of a visual learner, I find it very appealing, and with a single glance of it, if you can know a concept, I don't, I don't think there exists any better thing to go for. Coming to a common scenarios which usually writers have, writer's block. So, have you ever encountered it, and what are your ways to get out of
Well, yes and no. I'm not sure this is writer's block, but and this may sound like a very unusual thing to say, but when I am tired, when I'm physically tired or sleepy, I don't write. I simply have the discipline because what happens is when I'm tired or when I'm sleepy, I start to take shortcuts. And when I start to take shortcuts, the ending work does not come out very good. So I learned a long time ago that if I'm sleepy or I'm tired, just don't write and don't write. Now, on a personal basis, I typically get up in the summer times about 5 o'clock in the morning, and the hours from 5 o'clock to 10 o'clock in the morning, the first early hours, are my most productive. And so I will write from 5 to 10 in the morning, and then by noontime, I usually go do something else. One other piece of advice for anybody that wants to write a book, and this is heartfelt advice. If you wait for time to write a book, you will never write a book. To write a book, you've got to set time aside. You've got to have the discipline to say, okay, today I'm doing this and I'm going to do it. But I've got a lot of people that said, well, gee, I'll write a book when I get around to it. They're not ever going to write a book. But so you've got to have an organized, methodical, disciplined approach where you set time aside, and that's what you do is you write a book.
to that? Because, like, I definitely understand the part where procrastination, especially while writing a book, would come and hinder your like path of writing a book. So that's definitely there. So, okay, a question is that like, what are the books which you personally like apart from yours, and what are the genres which you personally find very appealing and you love to read it?
Well, um, uh, uh, in our profession, the book that Joe Reese has written on data engineering, I find to be very good. Um, I'll be honest with you, I don't find many books to be very good because many books are simply rehashing things that people already know. The books that are interesting are those books that are explaining things that people don't know. And there are not many of those books around. Now, when you go outside of our profession, uh, I like books about the American West, about how the West was before the Europeans came, and how people lived, and that's something I like to read. Also, I think I've read every book that I could find on the American Civil War. The American Civil War was a bloody exercise. 600,000 men died in the Civil War. I'll tell you a little fact that most people don't know, that at the end of the Civil War, there weren't enough men to go around. And that's where women started to have multiple marriages. Many women married the same man. Because if you were a woman after the Civil War and you wanted to have a family, there weren't enough men to go around. So that's it's called polygamy. That's where men would have many wives, and it was a necessity. It wasn't anything religious. It wasn't anything, I don't know. It was a necessity. If you were going to have a family, you had to share a man because at the end of the Civil War, most of the men had been killed off.
True. Like, I have read about American Civil War a little bit myself, and one thing is for sure, like the bloodbath that took place was insane.
Insane.
And yeah, so all right, let's talk about Forest Rim Technology. So, well, currently you are a CEO of this company. What does this company do, and what is its vision?
What Forest Rim technology does is it reads raw text, speech, print, internet, you name it. It takes raw text and turns it into a database. Once you've turned text into a database, you can do all sorts of wondrous things with text. Let me give you a couple of examples. One example is medical records. Medical records are written in the form of text, and they're written for one doctor and one patient. And that's what medical records are written for. The problem is, what if you want to look at not one patient? What if you want to look at 100,000 patients? And you say, why would I want to look at 100,000 patients? Well, think about COVID. Think about diabetes. Think about cancer. Think about heart disease. Think about all of these diseases. You learn so much about a disease when you don't consider one person, but when you consider a whole body of patients. And so there's a uh, great need to be able to look at multiple records of data. You can't do that with text. As long as the medical records are in the form of text, you can't do that. You've got to have it in the form of a database. So, what we can do is read medical records and take those medical records, turn them into a database. And now you can look at a disease across a whole population. You can ask such questions as how does COVID relate to smoking? How does COVID relate to gender? Are men more likely to have it or women likely to have it? How does COVID relate to a body weight? How does COVID relate to age? And by knowing these things as a researcher, now you start to understand the disease. But again, the way you get there is to go from text to a database. Now there are a lot of other examples. We don't have time to talk about them, but that medical records is just one example of the importance of being able to go from text to a database.
True that. And like especially for the medical record part and its application, I believe it's very wide. So like for example, here in India, we don't have that kind of a centralized medical information documentation. We don't have that. And considering like for example, if a average person goes to a doctor, let's just say couple of times or three times or four times in a year, those data does it just simply exists over the paper. We don't have it digitally. And let's just say if something goes wrong, you don't have a compilation of that documentation and can result into various weird issues. You need to revisit a lot of things. You need to have someone to tell you that yeah, this person may be allergic to this particular components and all. So that part is definitely there. And you talked about even images being converted to images being converted in a form of database. So do you see its application happening over, let's just say, OpenCV or like computer vision in a domain of computer vision in general?
Um, that is a difficult question. To some extent, that question is going to be answered in the future, and all we can do today is to do predictions of it. But when it comes to uh, AI and Chat GPT and things like that, they certainly can serve a lot of purposes. But the difficulty that I've found with those kinds of technologies is they don't really address business value and business need. That there, and I say that there may come some business value in the future, but I can't tell you that today. I don't know. But in terms of finding business value, someone said that AI and ChatGPT is a technology looking for a problem. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. That sometimes you find those problems, and that's wonderful. But textual ETL, what we do, does not look at data text the same way ChatGPT does. When we started textual ETL at Forest Rim, uh, the first thing we asked was, how do we find business value? We were from the very first day focused on finding business value. So in terms of being different from Chat GPT and AI, that's how we are different.
All right. So one question which I have in mind is like, what inspired you to start Forest Rim Technology, and what are its unique attributes which make it so different?
Um, what inspired me? One day I was working on data warehouse, and I don't know why I did this, but I sat back and I said, this is interesting. When we look at data warehousing, we're only looking at structured data, but structured data is really only 5 to 10% of the data in the corporation. Uh, isn't there a way to look at this other data in the corporation and find business value in it? And so it was a curious thing that led me to working with text. When I'm working with text, the first thing that we tried to look at was something called NLP, natural language programming, processing, and we took a good look at NLP. And I can tell you this, NLP was never designed to be a commercial product. NLP was designed to study language, but there's a difference between studying language and a commercial product that actually can use that language for something useful. And so we quickly discovered that NLP as a commercial product was not the right way to go. And so with that, we set out to find what is the right way to go. And we did it by trial and error. And we made many, many errors, but we learned from our errors. And so today we have a commercial product that's dedicated to business value that can process text. Now, very shortly, I hope I hope in the next few weeks. We've been working on this a long time, but we're going to be having a website that's open to the public where you can take your own text, put it through textual ETL, get your own results, and you can do this for free. Now, the one stipulation is you can't do, I think we're going to have a limitation of 100 documents or something like that. But so there's going to be, and if you want to process more, we'll certainly help you with that. But we're going, the thing about textual ETL is it's difficult to describe to people. People have never seen anything like it before. And when you have something that's difficult to explain and describe, the best way to do an explanation is simply to show it. And so we're going to give away for free your ability to turn a text into a database. Now, once you turn your text into a database, you still have to analyze it. And there are many ways to analyze the database that's created from your text. One way is through knowledge graphing, Neo4j, for example. Another way is through dashboarding. Tableau comes to mind. Another simple way is through Excel spreadsheets, CSVs. And so there's lots of different ways to take that text and start to analyze it. But so one and again, I say it should be a few weeks. We've been working on this for a long time. We're at the very end, and I'm like an expectant father waiting for the child to come. It should be here any day now, and so by the 1st of September, I'm going to be very upset if it isn't done by the 1st of September. But we're going to have a website. The website is going to be, by the way, the website is called datavox.ai. That's the website to go to. We're going to have set up on datavox.ai a facility where you can go in, you can feed it your own text, and you can get your own database coming out. And again, it's for the magic word around the world. It's for free. We do operate in multiple languages. Our primary language is English, but we also operate in Spanish, Portuguese, and Arabic. We're working on operating in Chinese right now. So we can, but again, the documents you feed it, I can tell you right now, you're going to get the best results if you put them off in English. So that's a little bit about the journey that we've made and where we're at today.
That's absolutely great. And I'll make sure, like, I don't know when this podcast, like, I'll make sure that this podcast would be coming up in a couple of weeks. But by the time if this podcast is up, I'll make sure that I'll be a huge advocate of this site. And as the golden word, it is like, if it is free and if it is able to gather a lot of eyes, it's gonna be a hit one. So, one thing, Bill, which I have a question is like over the time in your profession, I wanted to ask you like how to make a good product, like how to make those product meaningful. What's your suggestion and what's your insights on it?
Uh, when it comes to products in general, one of the things that really frustrates me is when I get on the internet and try to use other people's products that the interface doesn't work. Just the other day, I was trying to fill out a survey for some people, and I came to a point where you were stuck. You couldn't go forward, you couldn't go backwards, you couldn't go sideways, and that should never happen. What that says to me is that the developer never tested out the system because he or she would have quickly found out that you're trying to get some work done, and all of a sudden the system stops on you. It's one thing for your computer or the network to go down. It's another thing for the software. So uh, there is an abysmal notion of the testing and quality assurance for technology that's put out there. And that's one thing that frustrates me. In the old days, 20 years ago, when people were building their own applications, you oftentimes had major application errors. You had calculations being done wrong. You had algorithms being programmed incorrectly. You don't find that so much anymore today, and that's why, because most people don't build their own application. Most people use the application built by a professional software builder. And those people ought to. I think they do. I give pretty high marks to people that build software professionally. They know their software's got to work, and if it doesn't work, they're going to do bad things happen to them. So you don't find that quality problem as much anymore. But the interfaces, some of these interfaces are done by a kindergartner, a 6 year old, and it's very frustrating to try to get work done when you're being led by a 6 year old.
True that. And so that's definitely there. And that's, I believe, like in life cycle of any product, until unless your user experience is very good, the chances of recurring customer and their turnaround is very, very rare. So I guess that's the first, I'll say, first dessert which you offer to your user. Now, coming to how do you see the role of forest stream technology evolving, and especially with the advancement of AI and big data?
Well, the role of forest rim is kind of interesting. If you stop and think about it, many years ago, there were no computers and no databases. And then the database came along, the older databases of the world. And all of a sudden, the corporation could build databases, and the corporation could have data that it never before had access to. And that the data, however, that fits neatly into the technologies of yesterday is structured data. Uh, what Forrest Rim has done is opened up the world not just to what's in a database, but what's in a document. And if you stop and think about it, corporations have far more documents than they have anything in a database. And yet today, how do you find a document today? You go search for it. You go manually look for it. And how frustrating is that? How time consuming is that? How expensive is that? And the answer is it's painfully expensive to do that. And so what Forest Rim is doing is opening up the world of documents, not databases, but documents to the whole world. And who needs to look at documents? And the answer is everybody needs to look at documents. Insurance companies, banks, telecommunications companies, oil companies, uh, governments, everybody needs to look at documents. And so Textual ETL then is opening the world up for the first time to the ability of a corporation to now understand not what's in its databases, but what's in its documents. And that is an inflection point. That is something that hasn't been done before. That's very important, and that's what I think the role of forestry is.
That's absolutely great. And I guess one of the biggest application of this is like, let's just say a vague stat which goes around is that every day about 402 million terabytes of data gets generated like across the globe. A major chunk of it is documents, text messages, images, especially with all those social medias in place. So these and processing these are like one of it becomes very crucial, especially for sectors like, as you said, medical sector, banking, you name it. Its application is everywhere. So that's something which is very appealing and something which I'm very excited to see how it turns out. Now, let's talk about artificial intelligence. Like, let's talk about AI, the Gen AI, and how it is actually making its way. Now, AI has been into existence from quite some now, and even Gen AI was present. It's just that last year, 2023, this as a concept it got blew up, and I guess especially with the uh, onset of ChatGPT. Now, how do you see the role of AI in the field of data warehouse and data management in general?
Well, I'm probably going to say something to you that surprises you, or maybe it doesn't, but but I'm not a big fan of AI. I'm not a big fan of AI. Why? Because when I look at AI, two things. Where is the business value? Most of the AI that I've seen is what I call gee whiz. Look how cool this is. And you say, well, that's interesting. Yes, it's cool. What business problem does it solve? And for the world of me, I see very limited uh, business value that's being solved. And that's why I'm not a big fan of AI or generative A, of Chat GPT and things like that. Uh, However, there's another thing that's in the back of my mind, and that is that our profession, the IT profession, goes through what we call silver bullets. And we've been going through silver bullets for years and years. What a silver bullet is when somebody comes along and says, if I just had fill in the blank, then everything's going to be okay. And we've been doing silver bullets for years and years, and there have been a lot of things that have come on to the world in which we live, and 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 they simply, after a number of years, don't amount to much, or well, they don't amount to what was being hyped by the vendor. I don't know if you're familiar with the Gartner Group hype curve, but I think everybody in our industry ought to be familiar with the Gartner Group hype curve. Because what the Gartner Group hype curve shows is that these vendors come along and they tell you how great the technology is going to be, how it's going to do wondrous things. Then we install the technology. Then we find out that it really doesn't do all of the things the vendor said. And over a period of time, we finally do find out what it's going to do, but it's nothing like what the vendor has told us it's going to be. And some of the silver bullets have been such things as case technology. You probably don't even remember case technology right now, but once upon a time, computer aided software engineering. That's what everybody had to have. And then I'll tell you another one, .com. .com came along and said, oh my gosh, it's got to be .com. Another one that came along was data science. It's got to be data science. And so I'm afraid that most of what we're seeing with AI today is just another silver bullet. Now, the interesting thing about these silver bullets is that in almost every case, there was something positive created by the silver bullet. There really and truly was. I mean, .com today is a way of life of doing business, and that's important. But it's again, the vendors words the vendors spoke are nothing like the reality of what the product ended up being. And so I'm sure that AI is going to have some value into our world, but I can almost guarantee you it's not going to have the value that's being hyped by the vendor today. And I know that it's not popular to talk about the limitations of a product because in my world, everybody, oh, look at this, AI is going to do this, and and they don't like hearing me talk because I voice something they don't want to hear.
True that. And I believe like one thing is that um, about 3 weeks ago, I was having a word with Vladimir Iglovikov. Like he has been a grandmaster for Kaggle, and he currently runs a company called Elvination.ai. And surprisingly, even for him, he also had a very similar perspective about AI in general. What his perception was like for a company who is actually driven by AI. His perception was that with the all those all those shoe and shas which are happening currently, the eventual turnaround product of AI would be entirely different the way which we are perceiving it right now. 5 years down the line, chances are how you are currently leveraging Gen AI, it would be entirely different. Its application would be definitely be there, but how we will be using that is something which we need to see. Now, coming to the limitation of AI, one thing which I'm very interested in knowing is so apart from the compute prowess to run those kind of things, and especially like GPUs are a thing to run these large scale machine learning models. What do you think in terms of business? Like, where does AI actually lags?
Well, I I, I don't know. I'm going to tell you. Time, ask me 5 years from now, and I can give you a very accurate answer. But today, I don't know where AI is going to provide its find its place in business. Yeah, and I don't like saying I don't know, except that's the truth. I don't know.
True. That's kind of a way like how it will be unfolding over the time. That is something which we should be waiting and watching, and how it would be actually influencing the way we are living right now. Like general perception about AI and its application. So, do you feel that, like, in terms of the current operating market where Forest Rim has been operating, do you find few of the products as well as AI as a technology being a very good or like head-on-head rival for the market which you folks are wanted to try to tap into?
You know, I got to tell you, and we've talked to numerous people, and we do research on this all the time, and that is how does what we do compare to other things in AI? And to date, we've not found, and this has been confirmed by Joe Reese. I don't know if you know Joe Reese. He's the gentleman that is the head of data engineering. Joe Reese said, "Gee, Bill, this is not anything that anybody else does." And so, um, 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 some people consider us to be a form of AI, and if that's what you want to do, then that's fine with us. We don't. You can call us anything you want. Hopefully, nice things, but you can call us anything that you want. But from a standpoint of are we AI? Let me tell you something. We've been doing what we've been doing. It's taken us 22 years to do what we do. In fact, why did it take us 22 years? And I'll tell you why. Because when we started, natural language processing was what was the way that you go about handling text, and so we had to go in, understand, and try every feature that we could find in natural language processing. Now, some of the things that we found were useful. Most of the things that we found weren't useful, but it was a trial and error process, and to be frank, we didn't find very much that was useful in natural language processing. But we had to build it ourselves, try it, and that took 20 years to do that. But so we were doing what we were doing long before there was anything like AI or Chat GPT around. And so anyway, are we is textual ETL AI? I don't know. You can call it that if you want, and that's fine with me, or you can not call it that. That's fine with me. All we care about is that you find business value in it, that the managers of your company see that, gee, now we can do something we couldn't do before, and it's valuable.
True that. And I believe until and unless a product offers a very good business proposition, if it is offering that, like the chances of the success of that product, like it goes like beyond the limit. So that is definitely there, and I'm very very excited to use this product. Like I do few of the products here and there, like on my own, like on specified product basis. I'd love to try that. So one thing which I have, which I wanted to ask you is that with this era of data, like it's almost like a gold rush for data, like data products, database utilities. A lot of things are happening around data. So in this gold rush of data privacy as well as the ethical ethical AI or ethics which comes for handling the data, it becomes very very important. What's your perspective of it on it, and how do you think we can actually? So data leaks are like something which happens every quarter, every couple of months. How do you see this as a problem, and how do you what are your perspective on how this can be fixed?
Well, I don't particularly like the words I'm about to tell you because I don't think it's right. Uh, but privacy and individual information has not been protected well at all in the rush of data. We have a term in the United States called collateral damage. I don't know if you're familiar with the term collateral damage,
Yeah.
but collateral damage is when you have an enemy, you drop a bomb on the enemy, and a few innocent civilians are killed. And that's not. I don't like killing people, but in wartime, when you drop a bomb, people are going to get killed, and that's collateral damage. Well, part of the collateral damage of this gold rush of data that we're seeing is privacy has greatly suffered. And is that right? No, it's not right. Uh, did it happen? Is it happening today? Yes, it's happening today. I think that as our industry matures and as we grow, we're going to do a better job. We're going to have to do a better job on privacy. But is it done well today? No, it's not done well today.
True that. So one question which I want to ask, and I like it's become kind of my go-to question, which I'm asking to all those guests whom I have, and they are associated to the field of data. What's your perspective on AI and AI or database resources evolving, and in easy words, like AI taking over our jobs? Like in recent times, we have seen layoffs happening, and though I believe like it's sometimes the news channels as well as sites just to have a clickbait, they try to put it that yeah, this happened because of AI. But somewhere deep down, like for the conventional jobs or for the jobs that requires manual inputs, we see this happening. What's your perspective on that, like AI taking over our jobs?
Let me let me use an analogy. Many years ago, when people wanted to go from where they wanted to go to, they got into a horse and buggy, and there was a driver in the horse and buggy. And then one day, cars came along, and the driver of the horse and buggy said, "Oh my gosh, shortly we're not going to be riding wagons and horses around anymore." So, did the driver of the horse and buggy fear automobiles? And the answer is probably until the driver found out that he had to learn how to become a car driver, and then he became a chauffeur. And so I think that the fear of AI and what it can do is a normal fear. I think we've seen it in history in the past, but I think that ultimately it's going to mean that we're going to have people with better jobs doing more interesting things, and yes, it is going to have an effect on jobs, but in the long run, that effect, I think, will be a positive effect, not a negative effect.
True that. And that was something which I really wanted to know, and especially from a seasoned professional like you. Now, coming to something personal, like who is Bill Inman outside the world of tech? When you are not writing, when you are not working on your company, when you are not working on your ideas, who is Bill?
Well, I have a wife. I live in Denver, Colorado. I have two Scotty dogs, Jeb and Lena, and I play with my Scotty dogs every day. They run my house. You think you have your house? You don't. Your dogs have your house, and they run our house when they want to get fed and everything. I enjoy fishing. I don't get to go fishing very often, but when I do get the chance, I always try to go fishing. Uh, my wife and I next week are going down to a place called Santa Fe, New Mexico. And if you're ever in the United States, I recommend Santa Fe as the most interesting place in the United States. And I'm just gonna, I won't go into the many things that Santa Fe has, but I honestly can't think of a more if I were coming to the United States and had one place to go to, it would be Santa Fe, New Mexico. Now, most people say New York City. I personally do not care for New York City. I got mugged there, robbed once when I was in school, and so I don't have good feelings about New York. But Santa Fe, New Mexico is a magical place. We go there every summer and have a wonderful time. So that's a little bit about Bill Inmon.
That's great. And like whenever I'm in US, for sure this would be my bucket list place to go. Okay. Now, a question and sort of a future advice for our listeners, like who wanted to make their hands dirty and wanted to go into the field of data. With your experience, like with whatever the experience you have accumulated over the year, if you wanted to start fresh, how you'll be doing it? What should be the first steps of getting started into the world of data? And so that's what something which I really wanted to ask.
Well, now you're asking someone who has a prejudiced opinion, but if I were coming out of school and wanting to have a career in data, I would look to looking at text because text is not explored. It's not like structured data where we know a whole lot about structured data. We know very little about textual data. Number one. Number two, there is in terms of business value, there's great business value in text that isn't being looked at today. And why business's value is important to someone coming into our profession is if you're coming into our profession, you want to be as close to business value as you can. Why? For lots of reasons. Number one, because that's where promotions are going to happen. Number one. Number two, it's exciting and interesting. Number three, if your company decides to lay off people, you're going to be the last person to be laid off, not the first person to be laid off. So there's lots of good reasons to go into text. And now again, that's like asking um, uh, Santa Claus, where does he live? He lives in the North Pole. Of course, I would say that because I've spent the last quarter of my life working on text. But I believe it is interesting. Not only I believe it to be the truth.
That's absolutely great. And to have these kind of insights, I believe experience definitely plays a very vital role in defining and telling people that, yeah, this can be a safe bet. This can be something like, for example, if you wanted to explore more, this can be a way. Now, a question which I have for you is like, what what's next? Uh, what are the projects which you are working on? What's the next book which we would be blessed to read? So, what's next for Bill?
Well, we are working very hard to get the commercial version of our product out to the public, and we've been working on this a long time, and so but that day is coming very soon, and I wish I wish I could tell you the date that it was coming. I can't do that because I don't know. But it we have every reason to believe that in the next month or so we're going to have the commercial product out, ready, and available. That's one thing that's coming. As far as books are concerned, I have a new book coming out with DeGruyter Publishers on building the foundation for making AI, data mesh, and ML, machine learning, successful. Because you see, today people are trying to use the data they have with those technologies, and they're finding out that the technologies don't work as well as they ought to because they're not operating on data that's valid, data that's inaccurate, data that's incomplete, data that's not up to date, data that isn't accessible. Those are all hindrances to the effectiveness of AI. So I've got a new book coming out. It should be out in probably the November timeframe on the foundation of data that needs to be built to make AI successful. So those are some of the things that I have. And then on the immediate future, to next week, my wife and I are going down to Santa Fe. And when I go to Santa Fe, you wouldn't know I knew anything about data at all. I leave data behind me when I go to New Mexico.
That's great. And I guess I love the last point. So, having a work life balance is something which becomes very crucial. And especially in the world of tech, where sometimes life can become very, very hectic. So, how do you manage to uphold everything and also remain very calm in your normal life? How does your 9 to 5 and your 5 to 9 are different? How do you manage?
Well, for one thing, I work at home, number one. Number two, I work 7 days a week. I work probably 8 to 10 hours a day. So I love working, and I love working. Um, and I just started down this path. Let me tell you something that, in terms of text, uh, it's taken us, myself and my organization, 20 years to understand how to manage text. I almost laugh at I don't laugh out publicly, but I laugh nevertheless at these people that think you can just walk into text and somehow it's the same thing that you've always known. Text is very, very different from the world of structured data. And most people start with structured data, and when they get into text, they feel lost. And it's taken my organization 20 years to figure out how to feel comfortable with text. But I can tell you, we do feel comfortable with text today.
That's great, and that was very, very inspiring to hear you. Well, it has been a pleasure for listening from you, and I would absolutely love to use the upcoming DataBox product. And so, you as a person, like, what one thing which I found is, like, I guess we can talk for hours and hours, and I would love to have you again over the show because, like, for someone with creative abilities, someone who is a writer, they have lot of thoughts ongoing and their content pool is endless. And I'm like absolutely grateful and blessed to have you over the show. And I would love to see your more contribution towards the world of data and AI. And it was a pleasure to have you over the show.
Thank you, Akash. It was a pleasure talking with you.